Hello, friends. My name is Nandini Sengupta, and I write historical fiction and narrative history. My new book, The Blue Horse and Other Amazing Animals from Indian History, is a book that is very close to my heart because it combines everything that I find interesting and worth fighting for because I love animals and I love history. This book has some truly heroic human beings, but the fun part is that everything in their lives is looked at from the point of view of their favorite animals. So you have Akbar the Great and you have his favorite cheetahs, Saman Manik and Madan Kali. You have Shivaji and you have his pet dog, Wagya. You have Rani Durgavati and you have her favorite elephant, Sarman. And you have Chetak, the blue horse, and Rana Pratap. So you have these fabulous heroic characters, but for the first time, their critical battles, their glittering reigns, their wonderful lives is looked at from the point of view of their favorite animals. Because it is not just human beings who make history. Animals never get their points of view because history always puts them in the background. And yet, what fun it would be if they got to tell their side of the story. For the first time, they do. I hope you like reading The Blue Horse.
Good evening and welcome back to Studio One. Our next session is titled My Years with the Mousetrap, and we have our esteemed speakers Denise Sylvie and Graham Seat here with us. Denise Sylvie trained at Guildhall School of Music and Drama and began her career as an actress and singer working in the West End, film, television, and radio. Denise played Miss Caswell twice in the West End production of The Mousetrap before becoming production supervisor for the show and then artistic director. Recipient of both Stage 1 Bursary and Startup Fund for Producers, she is also an examiner for Trinity Guildhall and CDMT and is a singing teacher and coach. Graham Seed trained at RADA and is the best known for playing Nigel Puggeter in the radio series The Archers for 27 years. His theatre credits include more than 20 names, including The Mousetrap. Similarly, his television credits include more than 20 names. His film credits include Peterloo, Gandhi, Good and Bad, and Games, among others. He was also the recipient of the Broadcaster of the Year Award 2010. I request Mr. Graham C. to take the conversation forward.
Hello. Hi. I think I'm not sure Graham can hear me. Can you hear me, Graham? Clearly not. Hello, everyone. I think we're going to try and sort out Graham's sound. Yes, I'm sorry about this. He's downstairs.
That's better.
Oh, yeah. Can you hear now?
I can hear you, yes.
Marvellous.
Marvellous.
Okay, well, we're good to go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this talk on the Mousetrap. I think Graham is going to interview me, so I'll stop talking now until he asks me some questions.
Right. I'll begin. I hope you can all hear me. Well, it's a great joy to be here. I'll introduce myself. I'm Graham Seed. I've been an actor for over 50 years. I trained at RADA. And amongst my long career, I've done 4 Agatha Christie plays. The Mousetrap quite a lot, a play called Murder at the Vicarage, An Unexpected Guest, and Witness for the Prosecution. I'd like to introduce to you, she's not only my wife, but she knows more about the Mousetrap than probably anyone in Great Britain, because she's been associated with the Mousetrap for quite a lot of her life. Denise, let's start off by you telling us all about your history with the Mousetrap. When did you start in the show and in what capacity?
Well, I first went into the show in 1994, playing Miss Casewell, so that's 26 years ago. And it was the first production of the new producer who had then taken it over from Sir Peter Saunders, who was the original producer right back from 1952. So it was a great honour. I actually met Sir Peter, who was in the auditions, because he wanted to make sure that the changeover was going to be so good, and that he was happy to let the changeover happen. So it was a great honour to meet him as well. And we did that original. That original contract was for 6 months. They decided to do it at that point for 6 months, which was great because we were doing 8 shows a week. But
and
then,
previously, you hadn't had any previous experience as an actress in working in Agatha Christie's plays.
Not with Agatha Christie, no. I had worked with the director. The director who brought me in was somebody that I'd worked with. This is an interesting story because this goes on. I'd originally worked with the director in a repertory season, which is what we have in England. I worked with him for 18 months, and then he came over to start being the artistic director of the Mousetrap with the new regime of the Mousetrap, and he brought some of his favourite actors along, and I was greatly honoured to be one of them. And so he called me in 1994. We did it for 6 months. I left. I thought that was it. As a jobbing actress, that's what you do. And then 7 years later, I got rung up. So 2001, I got rung up and asked if I would like to come back and reprise the role. And I thought, well, why not? I had such a brilliant time the time before. And at that point, I had been working more as a producer than an actress. So I was coming back to work as an actress again, and they invited me back for 10 months, which was a huge honour. And
it's always quite nice, isn't it, to come back and play a role again, but because you find more things the second time, and it's not often as an actor that you have a chance to try a performance a few years later. So, I mean, that's a privilege. It might have its disadvantages, but it also has the huge advantage that you've been there. And of course, with any cast, I'm just speaking as an actor.
Yeah.
I mean, every cast brings a different element. Whoever you're working with makes it fresh, hopefully.
Well, I was about to say that. So you change, every production changes with the cast and also the director. It becomes a completely new piece, really, or you can find so many different things with it, which is what we did. And that.
So how did you end up doing the job that you do now, which is the artistic director of the London production, and you're heavily involved in the casting, and indeed occasionally having the fortune of taking the show around the world?
Yeah, well, the producer who had taken me on in 1994 was chairman of the Society of London Theatres at the time, and he ran this wonderful thing called Stage One, which is a training ground for producers. And I had done the course to become a producer about that time, and he had mentored me through that, so he knew that I had a lot of backstage experience and wanted to produce. So the artistic director who had brought me in originally in 1994 was about to retire, so they rang me up and said, I know this is a bolt out of the blue, but how would you fancy running the production and taking over from David Turner? And that's how it happened. And I thought, this is just like a dream come true. It's a gift of a job with a wonderful family atmosphere, because that's what the Mousetrap is and always has been, wonderful family atmosphere around the world.
And you look on it as a bit of well, all theatre is a family. That's why we love it. I mean, once you work in live theatre, it's a team thing with backstage, front of house. You must like it a lot that you've stayed with it for so long.
I do, because it's an ever-growing family, and everybody who buys into it, they buy into it totally. It was funny because actually Graham and I were out yesterday, oddly being out in this pandemic, and we ran into someone who I'd cast in the show 10 years ago, and they came up and they were very effusive, and I just said to Graham, I feel like Mrs. Chips. I don't know if anybody has seen what is it called, Goodbye Mr. Chips, which is a wonderful film, and it's a wonderful book, and it's about a school teacher, and he sees all his pupils go, and they, going into the world. And it was I feel a bit like that sometimes with the Mousetrap, because I've cast it now, I think probably 16, 17 times with different casts, and you know, each one I remember vividly, and it's a huge family. It's wonderful.
So Denise, what does your job at the moment entail? This is a bad time to ask, actually, because there is a pandemic going around the world, and it's certainly affecting English theatre. There's hardly a show open in the West End, sadly, and believe me, it's tough in the UK. There are a lot of actors not working because no one's going to the theatre. But when next year, hopefully, the Mousetrap reopens in the West End, what does your job entail?
I have to liaise with the director. We change the directors every 3 or 4 years, which keeps it fresh. It gives a different take on the show. That hasn't always been the case, but since I took over, I thought it was a better idea because it keeps it fresh and you get different ideas, and you also get a different sort of actor because with each director they bring in different sorts of actors. So, and certain actors want to work with certain directors, so it keeps up the caliber of the show as well. So I liaise with the director. I also cast the show, and we work between us casting that. That's over a period of about 3 or 4 weeks. And then we have to do that about a month or 6 weeks before we go into rehearsal because all the costumes are made from scratch. So our wardrobe mistress then liaises with someone that she has, a tailor that is based in Brighton, and also someone that knits all the jumpers for Christopher Wren. And she is based up in some island in Scotland, and she knits them by hand. The Fair Isle jumpers. I know this is extraordinary, but this is what happens. And so we have to have a lead time for about 6 to 8 weeks before we start rehearsals. And then they all need to know their lines as well, because we have a 2-week period to rehearse, which is really short. So they have to come knowing what we call in the business dead letter perfect.
Mm-hmm. And it's a very strange experience for an actor coming into the Mousetrap because, of course, you're rehearsing on the real set, which is normally you go to a rehearsal room and there are prop chairs and tables. But when if you're cast in the Mousetrap, certainly in the West End, and indeed now on tour, the chances are you have your set already, and which is quite important as there is a very short rehearsal period. Normally in the professional theatre, you're at least 3 weeks. And indeed, if it's the National Theatre or the RSC, it's probably 5 or 6. But it's a quick turnaround, isn't it, Denise?
Yes, it is. They come in on the Monday morning and we have a read through. We all sit around on the stage and have a read through. Then we give them lunch, and then they hit the ground running for 2 weeks. And we go into rehearsal rooms on the matinee afternoons. So we do that twice a week. But apart from that, they do it on the set, and they have their own rehearsal clothes and everything. They have their own set of stage management, different from the one that we have in the current cast. So it's like 2 separate.
Its longevity is extraordinary. I know Noel Coward and Terence Rattigan were very, very jealous when, especially Noel Coward, who was one of our greatest playwrights, he had very, very long runs, but he had the courtesy and grace to always contact Dame Agatha and congratulate her that her run had already surpassed his big successes in the West End. But even he, who has been dead a long time, would be amazed. And he might be a bit shocked, actually. And so would Agatha Christie be shocked that
she said when it came into town on November the 25th, 1952, that we might get a nice little run out of this, which she thought would be about 8 months. And here we are over 68 years later, still talking about it. And if it hadn't been for the pandemic, we'd still be on. It is extraordinary and actually rather wonderful, I think, in a way. It's a little piece of history. Somebody's asked me a question. What is the future of theatre post-pandemic? I don't know.
We keep our fingers crossed.
No, we are working. I mean, the Mousetrap, at one point earlier this year, we were aiming to be the first show to come back into the West End. And we had set up 2 separate casts so that we would have 1 week on and 1 week off, so that they would be essentially in their own separate bubbles. But as we were about to go into rehearsal with this, which was no mean feat actually, so there were 16 people and we were going to have to direct them in 2 weeks. So myself and the director were going to take it in turns. Everything got really, really bad here in England. And there were talks of there being another lockdown the day we intended to open the show. So quite rightly, the producer decided not to go ahead with that. And so we pulled it. So we have the casts in place and we are aiming to go at some point in the new year. I have no idea when, because we don't know what's going on here at the moment.
For those watchers and listeners, I have to tell you that like Broadway in New York, the West End of London is a very sad place. We were there actually yesterday, and the whole of Theatreland is so quiet, and cafes and bars are missing theatre. There are no tourists. It's been a terrible year, but with luck, the inoculation life will return. We have to think that, and actors will work again. Denise, tell us your favorite memories of the show. First of all, as an actress, because you played Miss Casewell twice, and
I did.
They were always with a different cast, weren't they?
Yeah, the second time I did it, I have the most wonderful memory because it was the 50th anniversary. And to start the 50th anniversary, there is we had a visitation from Sir Richard Attenborough and his wife, Sheila Sim. Now, Richard Attenborough was the very first Sergeant Trotter, and very well known in India for producing and directing Gandhi, which Graham was in. I'm just flagging that up.
Well, I had a very small part. I was a very young actor.
And actually, the film of Gandhi was paid for by the royalties that Richard Attenborough had earned from the Mousetrap. That's one little known fact. But anyway, so on the 50th anniversary, we were doing the show, and there is a wonderful charity that is continuing to run at the moment, but had just been set up at the time, called Mousetrap Theatre Projects, which brings children that would normally not be brought to theatre. They find the money, they raise the money to bring them along and see shows and, tell them what theatre is like. And this was the first ever time they brought children to see a show. And I was in the dressing room and you could hear the kids outside. And then suddenly there was this massive scream, and it was like, I don't know, I thought, oh my God, it's like a rock concert going out there. And I hung out the window because you could do, and I saw Richard Attenborough and his wife arriving, and the cheering from these kids were absolutely amazing. It was the most wonderful experience. And then at the end, when we took our curtain call, he came on stage and he did the curtain speech. And it was so moving. I've never forgotten it. It was just one of the greatest honors to be part of that, and on stage being part of that, actually. It's wonderful.
Talking about the longevity of the show, I have a hunch that we're so well known for this moment at the end of the play in which the actor who plays Trotter, who is the policeman, steps forward and makes a little speech asking the audience to not divulge who
just keep the
secret.
Murderer. Who've done it locked in your hearts.
That's right. And that's got so well known all over the country and the world that I think, well, I mean, funny enough, so many people who see the show actually forget. If you ask lots of families, they'll say, I can't remember who did it in the end. There is something about, I mean, as an actor working in whodunits, it is a different sort of audience, and we have to play a slightly different game of making them think, perhaps, is it us? Because first of all, in the Mousetrap, you're going to think, who's going to get killed? And then, of course, you think, who is the murderer? Who killed that person? And you can have a lot of fun as an actor raising the stakes a little bit.
But it's also, or when I'm watching the show, because I have to watch it quite a lot, and it's great fun playing the games of listening to the audience in the interval, and they're all guessing, and they're coming out with the most ridiculous ideas. But some of them might get it right, but it's always, you don't want them to get it right, because then you know the actors have done their job if they don't get it right. But it's fascinating listening to all these weird things that people say. I'm not going to say any of them because you may not have seen the play, and that will give things away.
Is it true that the Mousetrap started as a radio play?
That's very true. It was written for Queen Mary's birthday. It was a birthday present, and it was called Three Blind Mice at that point. It was a 15-minute radio play. And it had to change its name because there was another play at that time called Three Blind Mice. And so she then grew the piece into a full-length play. Yeah. Well done, Greg. Yes, it
So you've been terribly lucky, because, I mean, the Mousetrap has taken you all around the world, hasn't it?
I know.
Just about. I mean, I've been incredibly lucky that as an actor, I've worked all over the place, but I have such gratitude. I thank Agatha Christie. I mean, yes, I played Major Metcalf, and it's a nice part, and I've enjoyed it more and more the more I play it, because I found out that actually that there are no bad parts in an Agatha Christie. It's what you put into it. But it's taken me to Mumbai twice, and Bangalore and Chennai, and I've escorted you. I've gone with you, Denise. Where to? Where did you take it?
I've originally, before, but Graham was doing something else, I went to China with it. We went to Shanghai for a month, and I was directing it, but then the girl who was playing Casewell dropped out at the last minute, so I then also played Casewell and directed it, and just sort of generally looked after everybody. And we were in Shanghai for a month, and that was with an English cast. And then the following year, the same company who did it in Mandarin asked me to go over and direct it in Mandarin, which was one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life, I have to say. And I did it through an interpreter whose English was about as good as my Chinese, actually. So it was quite extraordinary. And then Graham came with me, and we directed it. I directed it and took it to Bangkok, Singapore, and Kuala Lumpur, and that was the most wonderful trip. Absolutely brilliant. But also on the back of that, for the 60th anniversary, because these were all around about the 60th anniversary and a couple of years later, we invited other companies who've been doing it around the world to come to the St. Martin's Theatre and put on their performance for one night only, or 2 nights only, on a Sunday. And we had a Hungarian version, a German version, and my Chinese version came over. The one I'd done in Mandarin came over. They did it in London, and that was great, actually. It was lovely to see.
And also for the 60th anniversary of the Mousetrap, the management decided for the first time to take the Mousetrap round England, around the country. It was a UK tour, and I think they've been very wary of taking it away from London, because you don't want to use up your audience. But I was lucky enough to be invited, and we went on a long year's tour to all the biggest theatres in the country, and in Ireland and Scotland. And we were sold out everywhere in big theatres, and it just shows the power of Agatha Christie. I mean, she's right up there with William Shakespeare in England. I think it's extraordinary.
When we were, it's funny you should say that, because when we were in China, we went to the equivalent of RADA, the drama school in China, and they'd all got busts of certain playwrights outside. And there was a bust of William Shakespeare, and they said, well, we really want a bust of Agatha Christie to signify Great Britain. And I said, well, you've got William Shakespeare. No, we want Agatha Christie, which was wonderful. I don't know whether that's actually happened yet. It's great.
So the show's been on an awful long time, and I'm going to ask Denise, I have a feeling there was, in the 50s and 60s, the script was slightly fiddled with, wasn't it? I mean, it works now so well simply because it's a period piece, and the audience like to watch 1950 England. It's very sentimental, but there was that sort of messy time that happened with a lot of plays that were written around 1950. Indeed, it happened a bit with Terence Rattigan. He went out of fashion, that you didn't know whether to play them as contemporary. And weren't there some awful things that happened that they tried to sort of modernize the Mousetrap?
Yes, they did. I was when I was in it the first time, actually, it was set in Christie time, so that's what they said. So it wasn't any particular time, and it was updated certain silly things, like he wasn't somebody wasn't smuggling stockings or whatever it was, he was smuggling drugs and things like that, and there were references to TV licenses and things that wouldn't really have been relevant in 1952. And it was really only, well, I suppose, yes, about 11 or 12 years ago that we decided to take it right back. We've got the original script, which we have in a beautiful glass cabinet downstairs in the theatre. We took that script out and we went through the whole thing, and it was the original 1952 script. And we went right back to that, which it works so much better because it is quintessentially a period piece now, and there's a huge attention to detail for every form.
But your set isn't quite period, is it? I don't believe your sofa in London was built before 1950.
No, it wasn't. I had it made in 2000. Thank you for that, Graham. But
so the changes have gone back to basics.
It's based on a sort of a view of the 1952 sofa, but yes.
And over these years, the actors, their contracts have varied over a year to 6 months. I, speaking as an actor, I think probably, especially with the Mousetrap, which I think 6 months run is long enough, but you have had yearly contracts, haven't you? So how many actors have you gone through?
We've gone through 460 in London, yeah, which is quite a lot of actors. But over 68 years, actually, is not that many actors.
And you tend not to invite them back.
Yes, we used to invite them back. In fact, I was invited back. So, but I think in some ways it's better not to, because it keeps it terribly fresh. There's always that difficulty if you invite someone back, saying, "Oh, well, I did it like this last time," and then that can actually affect some of the other actors that are in the cast. It's a double-edged sword. It's difficult, but we haven't, and it's worked for about the last 10 years. And people want to do the play, and it's great fun. I think we've only gone to 6 months in the last 3 years because we decided, as the play was so successful, that we would add an extra matinee. So they now do 9 shows a week as opposed to 8. And I think if you do
it's a long haul.
It's a long haul.
Yeah, and also you'll probably get a better actor for 6 months commitment than a year. Would you agree?
Yes, I think, yeah, you would. And everybody gets very tired. I mean, however long you do the piece, you'll always go through that pain barrier. I used to call it repetitive stress because you're doing it, so many times. You get, the pain
it's
barrier.
It's a play about information too. The audience, there are crafted people who enjoy an Agatha Christie. They're looking for clues. They're not maybe looking for wonderful characterization, because the characters, that there is this type and that type, they're looking for information. And what's the best part for an actor in the Mousetrap is you're playing to full houses, which we all like doing. I mean, that's a bonus. That gets you through it far more than you think. It's a tremendous help. And I haven't participated, but is it true there's a party every 10 years and all the cast meet up?
Yeah, there is. That's wonderful. And I've been to 2 of those. So we go to the Savoy Hotel, which is in London by the river, and every living member of all the casts back to 1952 is invited, and it's bliss. You could just see lots of old friends, but also, I mean, I met the woman that played my part originally in 1952, who unfortunately died only about 6 months ago. But she came to both parties, and Richard Attenborough and Sheila Sim were there for the 50th one. And there was a photograph taken of all of us. And 12 years ago, whenever it was, actually the 50th anniversary is nearly 20 years ago. It's frightening. But there's a photograph of all of us there, and it's just a joyous thing, and meeting all these wonderful people who then became famous for other things as well, that were there. And we're all part of that family.
Something I'd like to mention, which I'm sure you'll be interested to hear about, is that for an actor, it's very old-fashioned. We have a wind machine. We make our own door bangs backstage, which is very old-fashioned. It's part of an English theatre that you think of with Donald Wolfett and that wonderful play The Dresser, isn't it? And the sound effect and the snow effects. Now, I have to confess, in London, the snow effects, because we all come on with snow and you see it outside, but the snow machine are wonderful. And the Indian, I think you poor Indian audiences suffered a bit last year because the snow was always a problem, because it's
came out of the canister.
It tended to melt before we came on stage. We sprayed snow on us, but by the time we came through the doors, it had practically gone, and that was always a problem.
But talking about the snow machine, Graham, when I was first in it in 1994, it wasn't there. That was a quick change room in London, and that we used to be. The snow was like chopped up tiny bits of plastic carrier bag that were thrown on us, so it never melted, and they used to sweep it up and use it again. And the snow machine only arrived halfway through the first time I was in it. But when we went,
I thought it'd been there a long time.
No. Well,
now,
yeah.
but Denise, I want you to go back to that fateful day at the start of this year on March the 16th, when the show, for the first time in its history, I think, it had to close down. What was that day like? Because you were actually there, weren't you? If you could talk us through it.
Well, it was pretty dreadful, because I was at home at about 5 o'clock, and the show goes up at 7:30, and we watched our Prime Minister Boris Johnson not say that, he didn't actually say that the theatre should close, but that it was that London was beginning to sort of implode. So I went in with a view to say, okay, well, I called, there were 2 understudies that were over 70. So I thought, okay, well, I've told them not to come in. Oh, in fact, one of the actors was over 70, so I had to put the understudy on the hotel. So I was on the tube coming in, which is a 20-minute journey. And by the time I got into the theatre, we'd been told that we have to pull the show. So I had to tell all the actors, I had to get on the stage and say, look, this isn't going to happen tonight. I don't know how long it's going to be. And knowing that it was going to be, at least a month, 2 months, and their contract was going to finish 3 weeks later. So we had a new cast about to start rehearsals the following Monday. But I had to say, no, I don't know how long it'll be. And I mean, the devastation in those poor kids, because some of them, it was their first job, not to be able to finish that was just horrendous. And then whether it was the right thing to do or not, I took them round to have a drink. There's a pub around the corner. And the weirdness in that pub was that there were about 4 other theatre shows in that pub, the theatre next to us, and everybody had done the same thing. And the
last drink saloon, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And it was probably
and of course, none of these actors, none of you all knew that it was, no one would have thought really that you still haven't come back.
No, that was March 16th. And where are we now? December whatever it is, 13th. Isn't that extraordinary?
And all these West End theatres are very historical anyway, and they're old and dusty. And goodness knows what it's like backstage, and whether the stages have been swept and cleaned.
Well, our theatre is actually looked after very, very well, because we've got.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's good.
And I went into my office, and it had been beautifully cleaned and steam cleaned. Mind you, we all thought we were going to start again. I think
but that is the first time that it's closed in its 68 years, isn't it?
It is. There was one night about 10 years ago that there was a massive power cut in the West End, and every theatre closed down. That was one night, so that doesn't really count. And I think just before I took over, we had a huge snowstorm and nobody could get into town. But apart from that, in 68 years, it's never stopped.
Mm.
And we want to come back bigger and better than ever when we start next year, because it is, it's a joy to be there, and it's a wonderful piece of theatre and a wonderful piece of history, and we don't want it to be off too long.
Mm.
Yeah, and we've
Yes.
got lots of actors clambering to be in it still,
Mm.
which is great. Do you have any other questions, Graham?
Well, now you described it. The future. You hope the show will go on, and as an actor who's been privileged enough to be in it, it can develop as as long as you play it for real. The situation is such that there is no reason why audiences won't continue to love it for years and years to come. I wonder, are we allowed to open it up and take any questions?
Take some questions in a few minutes, I think.
Yes. We talk of favourite memories in the show. All actors have lots of memories, but we all have our favourite moments. It's just like wearing a very comfortable pair of slippers, perhaps, when you play in the Mousetrap. I think it's a demanding part if you play the policeman Trotter. He's got to keep on his toes. I think it's a very, very wonderful thing to do, to be in something which is so famous, and you get audiences that are not regular theatre goers. Sometimes they're going because it's like if you come to London, you might go and visit the Tower of London, and you also might go and want to go and see the Mousetrap.
Oh, do you know, it's because it's such a piece of history, and it's also very good for first dates, because people who want to go on a first date, they know it's a safe piece of theatre to go to. And we did for the 60th anniversary, we did a one evening where if you'd seen it, and you'd seen it on your honeymoon or something like that, please come back. And a lot of people did, and I did a talk about it afterwards, and there was an audience full of people that were then in their sort of 80s that had been to see it from their first date or their...
Well, I remember that I was taken by my mother and father as a schoolboy, and you think it's rather charming that 3 or 4 generations of families have probably passed that on, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. When I did it the first time, actually, which was 1994, I was waiting outside the theatre for someone, and somebody came up to me, and he'd actually come over from India with his son, and he said, I've purely come over here to show my son the Mousetrap, because I remember seeing it when I was about 12 and he was 12, and I wanted him to have that rite of passage as well. And I thought that was terribly moving. It was a lovely thing to do, and that's the charm of the piece, really. It's a total joy to be part of it, and I've never regretted doing what I do, and I feel it's a great honor. And there's actually only 3 people, including myself, that have done the job that I do, and that is a huge honor as well. Since 1952, it's just rather wonderful, sort of being the keeper of the keys, really, to the show. No, I love it, actually. I really love it. Should we open it up now for questions? Anybody would like to ask any questions? I see in the chat room that we have questions. So if anybody would like some, can we hear
I don't have access to that. But,
I'll keep talking till some pop up, shall I?
Well, I'll help you.
There we go. Oh, have you ever met audience? Here we go. Can you see these, Graham? Yes.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Have you ever met audiences
which did not quite get the play?
I've
met audiences who no. That's the simple answer. I've met them who've said it might not be the type of thing, and that's fair enough. But
they've appreciated how good it is, I think. And it's because it's a very, very good story. It has everything, because it has comedy as well as that thriller aspect. So you're not just suddenly thrown into whodunit. There's a light-hearted touch to the
And
whole
there's a
thing.
very dark side to the story, which is based, I believe, Denise, on a true story, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Some garciness happened to some orphans, was it? Or
Yeah, it was a story that was in the newspaper at the time of three children that were taken into care, and one of them was killed. So that's the truth of it. And that, yeah.
It's a very hard play to talk about because we can't give anything away. So I don't know, how much you guys know who are watching us, because I don't want to spoil the story if you haven't seen it. And as an actor, we can't discuss the subtleties, because if I told you a lot of information about Major Metcalf, it would maybe affect your understanding of the play. So
would it?
well, I think it probably would. I mean, one of the things that sold the show is, maybe the people are not what they seem, which would be a good headline. Who is as they say? Who are these strange collection of people who arrive at this snowed up boarding house, hotel, Monkswell Manor, who arrive in a snowstorm, and soon we have to find out very quickly who's who. And it's run by a young married couple who have only just opened the place.
And they have no idea what they're doing. They've inherited the house from her aunt, and they didn't know what to do with it. And he was a barrister and she was a teacher. And they decided to, just throw caution to the wind and open it as a guest house. But I was just thinking, there's no way you would update it any further than the 80s. But of course, if anybody had a mobile phone, then there'd be no story. So
yes, that goodness there isn't. But it's. I mean, I remember. It is a real family show that all ages can appreciate it. I think.
And we've done wonderful things as well with children. We did for the 60th anniversary, we brought all the year 6 children in, who were about 10 or 11, to watch the show, and then they came back and they wrote their own thrillers, and some special ones were chosen, and we got the actors in the show to read their thrillers out, and then they had a competition and they won a prize. But it was lovely because the ideas they got from seeing the play, and these wonderful stories that came out of it, and how many of those children are going to end up being writers, as well, from watching the Mousetrap. That's also quite an amazing thing. Why do you believe the play has been so popular? I think it's because it is a good story, and because you needn't be scared about who you take to see it. It has everything. It has the comedy, it has the thrills. You're guessing who done it, which is, everybody loves a who done it. We watch television all the time with all sorts of who done it. It's exciting. And I think it's also because it's self-perpetuating as well, because it's been there for so long, so everybody feels they should go and see it. And because it's a little bit of history, and Agatha Christie is just, it's safe, and it's, I don't know, it makes me feel very calm and makes me feel quite happy, because it's an England that doesn't exist anymore. Or did it ever exist?
It doesn't exist.
No. But
it's probably a good thing.
It did,
And if you come to London, it's a beautiful theatre, which is an event to go to. It's the most beautiful place as a tourist to go to.
Theatre in London, and it's beautiful mahogany inside, and I don't know why every time I go there I think, is it, it's like going home to granny. I don't know why, it sort of feels safe. Somebody just flashed up quickly, is it ever going to be done in Hindi? I think it has, hasn't it? I think it, not the Mousetrap, but there was another Agatha Christie play that was done, I think earlier this year in Mumbai, and I think that was done in Hindi.
I don't see why not. If it's been done in Chinese, I think
Mm.
it well deserves a Hindi production.
Yes, absolutely. I don't
In
see
fact,
any.
we were once given a little photograph of an amateur production, weren't we, in
Oh,
Mumbai, Denise?
I have it here. Can anybody? You probably can't
There you
see.
go. Look at that.
Can you go? Can you see
That's an
that?
all Indian cast, and they're very young.
It was a school production, I have to say, but
It's a school production. Yes.
yes, which is rather lovely. Yeah. Do we have any other questions coming in?
Any more questions?
Any other Agatha Christie? Well, I think an awful lot have been. Any other Agatha Christie novel or story that you think should be made into a play? Well, my favourite Agatha Christie novel is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. And that, I believe, was turned into a play, and possibly not very successfully, in the early 1930s. But I think I'd love to get that done as a play, because I think it's a wonderful story. But some of these ones, because The Mousetrap was written by Agatha Christie herself, and a lot of these adaptations from the books have been written by other people, and that's slightly different. Because you've been reading a book, haven't you, Graham, of Unexpected
Yes, I think it's probably the other way around, that a lot of Agatha Christie's plays have turned into books that are not written by Agatha Christie. And so Agatha Christie, she either wrote plays that originated, were the first time as a play, but there's a play called The Unexpected Guest that was written as a play, and then a book version of it was written. But
the humor, A Mirror Cracked, From Side to Side, which is a book, and then it became a hugely famous film. That was put on as a play here, and I think actually that was the one that was put on in Mumbai in Hindi at the beginning of the year. That's been adapted. Actually, that was rather well done, the version we saw here.
It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary. I mean, here we are in 2020, and Agatha Christie is bigger than she's ever been. There are more film adaptations and television adaptations, and touring stage productions than ever. It's not slowing down, is it?
No, and it's and they were sort of, they tend with the I don't know about whether you see them in India, but in London and in Britain, they've been doing sort of modern adaptations of some of her plays for television, and some of them have been extraordinarily good. So it keeps that longevity going, even though you're sort of updating it slightly, but bringing new audiences in the whole time. And I think that's actually wonderful. You can't do that with The Mousetrap, but with some of the other stories, it just keeps that essence of Agatha Christie going, which can only be a good thing, because the stories are great, I think. Are there any other questions? Any other Agatha Christie? That's the same question, isn't it? How do you keep the storyline from leaking out in the press, especially at the time of internet? So, well, you can't. You say to the audience, keep the secret locked in your hearts. It is on Wikipedia what happens, and I've been in touch with Wikipedia. There was a period about 10 years ago where I removed it myself, and every 24 hours it pinged back on there again, and we went ongoing for that for about 10 days, and then I got a rude note from Wikipedia saying this is public domain and you can't remove this. And we did try to take action about, but you can't do this.
And what's the old story of the taxi driver who drops off a family for the show and they don't tip? And if they don't tip, the taxi driver winds down the window and says, "Don't say what he said." Policeman, or it was the, and tries to give it away. Yeah.
No, it's that's a lie. Actually, that's not true. So.
Oh, I heard that story.
I know everybody's heard that story. There's also the story about the understudy that never get a chance to go on, the old understudy. And when she was told to go on, she said, "Oh, just going out to my dressing room to get something." And we never saw her again. She just went straight out of the dressing room and kept walking forever and ever. That's not true either. But so it did happen with one actor once, but that was another story. but there's a lot of old stories that aren't necessarily true. So there we go. Are there any other questions? Do you think online or digital viewing will be an option in the future? I don't think so for the Mousetrap. I think so for a lot of other plays. I mean, how's everybody finding digital online streaming? I mean, I think it's definitely for the future, and I think it will continue long after the pandemic, but I don't think so for the Mousetrap somehow.
When would it be possible to make a big Hollywood film of the Mousetrap? When do the rights allow it?
The rights will only allow it 6 months after the play has come off, but not in a scenario as we are in now. So, yes. So if the producers decide to take it off now, 6 months later, then somebody could acquire the film rights, but at the moment, no, there's no way they can. So we'll just have to see it on stage, which I think is the right way to see it, really. So we won't be streaming it. But other Agatha Christie is highly likely, and other plays highly likely, as I'm sure everybody is watching on all around India at the moment, because we certainly are here, because it's the only way we're going to see anything that's any form of theatre, I think, at the moment. There are no more questions. Do you have anything else to ask me, Graham? Graham's gone completely silent. Have you? I thought you'd frozen there for a second. Sorry. Well, it's been an absolute joy, and thank you so much for asking us to do this. I cannot say what a joy it's been to be, going over to India and with the Mousetrap on 2 separate occasions, and I do hope that we can do it again soon, because it's we were looked after so well, and it's wonderful just to sort of bring the joy of Agatha Christie to as many people as we possibly can. It's
and if you had a dream, Denise, or if you were invited, I mean, you're a bit too young now, maybe, but would you like to give your Mrs. Boyle?
One day I would love to. When we came over the last time, we hadn't got an understudy for Mrs. Boyle, so I learnt it. I was terrified. There was no way I wanted to go on and do it. I was absolutely terrified. I spent my whole time worrying and making sure that the actress playing Mrs. Boyle was okay, because that would have been quite scary. But yeah, why not? Then I'd love to sort of say I play as many parts as I possibly can. There have been a few actresses that have played all 3 female parts. But I think I'm a bit long in the tooth to play Molly now, so maybe the only one is to do Mrs. Boyle, but possibly not just being thrown on. That would be a bit scary, I think. But no, we had a fabulous time in India, and I'm just very proud to be part of this whole scenario. Actually,
it was strange, because when we played it in Chennai, there was a stall outside, and there was a whole Agatha Christie book launch of almost every book she's written, wasn't it, and play?
Well, yes,
I as an actor felt that a strong percentage of the audience knew the story that they were watching, which underlined how popular the Mousetrap and, of course, Agatha Christie is all around the world.
Oh my God, yes. Well, she is. I mean, in every country I've been to, and I've spoken to people, it's I'm just reading notes that's going on the side of my screen. Sorry.
But actors, but we have to treat it like all plays. We have to treat it with absolute commitment and respect. And I'll try not to comment on what she's. I mean, we have to play it for real. Although it is wonderful when we get laughs and people enjoy some of it.
Well, it is, but that's part of her charm, is that she is a wonderful writer, that she brings in the comedy as well as the drama, as well as the suspense. That's what makes her such a brilliant writer, I think. She just sees the whole rounded piece, and she knows what audiences want.
And a very charmingly period piece. I mean, Major Metcalf is very impressed about the young woman who runs this hotel, and he has this line. He says, "A little woman does it all herself," which is which is a great period line, which of course is not what feminists would like to hear, but
certainly not.
That gets a chuckle
very
of
much
laughter.
the 1950s. I think we've come to the end of this.
Ah,
do you know,
well,
it's
it's been
been
enjoyable. I hope you've all enjoyed it.
Thank you so much
As
for
we
inviting
have.
us. Yes, it's been absolutely lovely. So thank you so much for everything. Don't go yet, Graham. You've got to stay. There we go.
Thank you so much for this exciting session. It was a pleasure to be a part of it. Our next session begins at 6:45 p.m. Please join us for Salzburg Global Seminar Session, Artificial Intelligence and Business after this short break.